everybody, I'm Noah from Midwestern Marx. This is 1 Minute Marx, and if you got a minute, I'd like to discuss another term today that gets misused all the time. That term is social chauvinism. Seriously, with this one, I've seen it thrown around and stretched and twisted up so much that you'd think it was a term only used by those guys in old-fashioned pizza parlors to refer to the dough that they spin around up in the air to make the pizza pies. You know, but it's not that, obviously, right? It's not that. Before we get to what it actually means, though, I want to talk about why this happens for a minute. Understanding that can help us understand how necessary learning the substance behind terms that we hear in Marxism is so important, right? In 2022, we're coming out of a period where Marxism was beaten back and repressed, with other forms of thought and views put in its place, and established sort of a hegemony within what we call the left. The period we often refer to as the New Left period, right? Which was filled with infiltration and confusion, pushed and, most importantly, funded and planned by the capitalist class in order to attempt to make a more compliant left that wouldn't be a threat to its power the way Marxism and communism are. Since our conditions are changing so rapidly in this new era, everyone now is sort of scrambling to play catch-up and learn all of these things that have been kept from us in order to really save our society. And where do we turn these days for education, right? We turn to the academy, to the media, and to the internet. And all of these institutions are owned by the capitalist class. They're home to the very distortions that we need to overcome. When we begin to learn about communism, socialism, etc., we come across all of these sort of well-proliferated distortions and misuse of old Marxist language first. And we sort of let context fill in the rest, guessing at what words can mean and trusting whomever might be using them before we heard of them to be using them correctly. This is especially true for the term social chauvinism. These days when we hear it used, it's mostly in reference to Marxist-Leninists who refuse to write off the parts of the working class that others do, which isn't really how Marxism ever uses such terms as sort of universal descriptions of particular parts of phenomenon, right? What determines social chauvinism for Marxism is an essential quality, and it takes on different characteristics in any time and place we're talking about. And see the video, The Dialectic of Form and Content, for more on that. But it had different characteristics in, say, the Soviet Union of 1965 than it did in Germany in 1919. It has different characteristics here in the USA than it did in 1925 here, right? For Marxism, it's less a part of conscious thought and more about how the unconscious or social consciousness, which is largely attributed to class and community, where you're from, how that shapes how you think and who you are, and how that creates each conscious thought we have and shapes the particular forms these thoughts take on. And this term, social chauvinism, describes a part of this which considers itself or one community or society, inherently superior to others. The key word here, inherently, as part of its way of being, unchanging. How an individual may feel about this, whether they lament this fact and consider it unjust, or love it and consider it the natural order, that is a secondary conclusion for Marxism. It's not part of the sort of building blocks and essential nature of social chauvinism. And just for clarity's sake, it's only a fact to the social chauvinist in question, not objectively, not out in the whole world. As a quick example, in the earlier periods of American history, social chauvinism could often take the form of what we call white man's burden style racism, right? Or a civilized people having the burden of civilizing the backward savages, right? They saw this as a noble thing, as weird as that sounds to our ears today. For them, this racist position was something akin to charity almost. And this is a key part of understanding social chauvinism. It's also important to understand that this can have many characteristics across time and place and even class. Another example of social chauvinism is the bourgeois notion that the working classes are all unenlightened and socially backwards rabble and inherently inferior to those who rule over us. We see this form of social chauvinism in many of our upper classes right now. And that's it. I've taken enough of your minutes for one day. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.